Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we share powerful narratives that inspire understanding and resilience. Today's story follows Dr. Jordan Carter, a man whose grace and strength in the face of prejudice turn a night of tension into a lesson in dignity and compassion. Stay tuned for this remarkable tale. It was a stormy Friday night, the kind that wrapped the city in chaos and tension. At Memorial General Hospital, the emergency room buzzed with relentless energy. Phones rang incessantly. Anxious families huddled in whispers, and the fluorescent lights cast a pale, steady glow over the bustling scene. Among the staff weaving through this storm of activity was Dr. Jordan Carter, a tall, composed man in his late 30s, dressed in a crisp white coat with a stethoscope slung around his neck. His presence radiated calm authority. Dr. Carter had spent years cultivating that calm, a demeanor that not only soothed panicked patients, but also commanded respect in a profession that had not always been kind to him. Tonight, as he moved swiftly between patients, his focus was unshakable. But the arrival of Officer Mark Taylor shifted the energy in the room. Taylor was a stocky man with a perpetually furrowed brow and the air of someone who carried his authority like a weapon. He stormed into the ER, dragging a young man, barely out of his teens, by the arm. The boy's hands were bloodied, his face pale and bruised. Taylor's voice boomed through the room, sharp and impatient. "Where's the doctor? We got a situation here." Dr. Carter turned toward the commotion, his professional instincts kicking in. "I'm Dr. Carter," he said calmly, stepping forward. "What happened?" Taylor's gaze swept over Jordan with a flicker of disbelief. His eyes lingered on the doctor's face, then the neatly pinned name badge on his coat. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, a mixture of condescension and amusement. "You're the doctor?" he said, his tone thick with skepticism. "Aren't you a little underqualified for this?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Conversations faltered, and the staff around them paused, stealing glances at the exchange. Jordan's expression remained steady, though his chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he'd faced such insinuations, and it wouldn't be the last. But tonight, the weight of Taylor's words seemed to press harder than usual. "What makes you say that?" Jordan asked evenly, his voice calm but firm. Taylor chuckled, his grip tightening on the injured boy. "I don't know. You just don't look like the guy running the show around here. Thought I was looking for someone different." The ER seemed to collectively inhale, the tension thick enough to cut. Nurses exchanged uneasy looks, and even the security guard by the entrance shifted uncomfortably. But Jordan held his ground. He wasn't about to let this man rattle him. "I can assure you, Officer Taylor," he said, his tone measured, "I'm exactly who you're looking for. I've spent years earning my place here, and I take my responsibilities seriously. Now, if you'd let me examine the patient, we can move forward." Taylor scoffed but said nothing more, though the smirk never left his face. He released the young man, Caleb, who stumbled slightly before a nurse caught him and helped him onto a gurney. Jordan immediately shifted his attention, focusing on Caleb with the kind of precision and care that came from years of experience. "What's your name?" Jordan asked the boy gently as he pulled on a pair of gloves. "Caleb," the boy mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Okay, Caleb," Jordan said with a reassuring nod. "We're going to take care of you. Just try to relax." But Taylor wasn't done. He loomed in the background, his arms crossed and his eyes boring into Jordan like a challenge. "Don't waste your time. Document," he called out. "He's just another thug. Probably got himself into this mess trying to steal something." Jordan ignored him, his focus unwavering as he examined Caleb's injuries. "Nurse, let's get some gauze and antiseptic over here," he instructed calmly. His voice, though soft, carried authority. But Taylor's words lingered in the air, cutting deeper than the officer probably realized. The room grew quieter, the staff moving carefully, as if afraid to disturb the fragile atmosphere. Jordan worked methodically, his hand steady as he stitched a cut on Caleb's arm. The boy winced but said nothing, his eyes darting nervously between Jordan and Taylor. The officer's presence was like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive, People like him don't change. You know, Taylor muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. You can patch him up all you want, but he'll just end up back here. That's what people like him do. Jordan paused, his hands still for a moment as he absorbed the words. He took a slow breath, steadying himself before turning to face Taylor fully. His expression was calm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that commanded attention. People like him? Jordan repeated, his voice quiet but piercing. And what exactly do you mean by that? Officer Taylor? Taylor hesitated, caught off guard by the question, but his smirk quickly returned. You know exactly what I mean, he said, his tone challenging. People who don't belong here. People who get a free pass when they shouldn't. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The nurses, the techs, even the patients nearby. Everyone was watching. Jordan took a step closer to Taylor, his white coat immaculate under the harsh lights. He stood tall, his presence commanding yet composed. Let me tell you something, Officer Taylor, Jordan said, his voice firm but steady. My job is to save lives. All lives. It's not my place to judge who deserves care and who doesn't. I'm here to do what I swore an oath to do. And you? Your job is to protect people, not tear them down. Taylor's face flushed, the smirk slipping for just a second. Jordan's words, though calm, carried the weight of truth, cutting deeper than any argument could. Without waiting for a response, Jordan turned back to Caleb, resuming his work with the same meticulous focus as before. In the corner of the room, a nurse smiled faintly, her admiration for Jordan evident. The tension in the ER hadn't dissipated, but it had shifted. The balance of power had tilted, however slightly, in Jordan's favor. Taylor might not have realized it yet, but he'd been bested, not through anger or aggression, but through the quiet strength of a man who knew his worth and refused to be shaken. As the storm outside raged on, Jordan finished stitching Caleb's wound, his hands as steady as ever. Taylor remained in the background, his presence still heavy, but Jordan didn't let it distract him. This was his ER, his domain, and no one, not even a man like Officer Taylor, was going to take that from him. The storm outside continued to rage as Officer Mark Taylor lingered in the emergency room at Memorial General Hospital. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, his presence a stubborn, silent challenge. His glare was fixed on Dr. Jordan Carter, who moved with the calm precision of a seasoned professional. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed as if the tension from their earlier exchange had dissipated. But everyone in the room knew better. The air was heavy, and Taylor wasn't about to let the matter drop. Jordan, however, had mastered the art of composure. His years of facing prejudice, both overt and subtle, had taught him to remain steady. No matter the storm, he worked methodically, his focus entirely on Caleb, the young man Taylor had brought in earlier. Caleb's wounds were now stitched, his breathing even as he rested on the gurney. But the damage Taylor had inflicted with his words still lingered in the boy's anxious eyes. Hold still, Caleb, Jordan said gently as he checked the boy's vitals. His voice was calm and reassuring, as if the tension in the room didn't exist. Caleb nodded, wincing slightly but complying. You're doing great. We'll have you feeling better in no time. Behind them, Taylor scoffed loudly, his derision cutting through the relative quiet of the ER. You're wasting your time. Document kids like him don't learn. You patch him up tonight, and I'll be dragging him back in here next week. The remark sent a ripple of unease through the room. Nurses exchanged glances, and even the patients seemed to sense the undercurrent of hostility. Jordan paused, his hands still as he took a slow, steady breath. Then, with deliberate calm, he set down his tools and turned to face Taylor. Officer Taylor, Jordan said, his voice measured but carrying an edge of authority. Do you often decide a person's worth before knowing their story? Or is it just easier for you to assume? Taylor straightened, his smirk returning. I don't need to know his story. I've seen it 100 times. He's just another troublemaker who'll never change. Jordan's expression didn't waver, but his voice grew sharper. And what does that make you? The man who gets to decide who's worth helping? The one who gets to stand in judgment over everyone else? The room grew quieter still. Even the faint hum of monitors seemed muted as the weight of Jordan's words settled over the ER. Taylor opened his mouth to respond, but Jordan cut him off, stepping closer until he was standing just a few feet away. "My job," Jordan continued, his voice steady and deliberate, "is to save lives, every life. It doesn't matter if it's a cop, a criminal, or a scared kid who made a mistake. That's what I swore to do. And you, Officer Taylor, swore to protect people, not degrade them. So tell me, are you doing your job tonight?" Taylor's face reddened, the smirk slipping for the first time. He stammered, searching for a retort. But Jordan's calm, unwavering gaze held him in place. It wasn't anger that silenced Taylor. It was the sheer weight of Jordan's quiet conviction. "Doctor," a nurse called from the other side of the room, breaking the moment. "We got a trauma case coming in. They're asking for you." Jordan nodded once, his gaze lingering on Taylor for a moment longer before turning back to Caleb. "You'll be fine," he said softly to the young man, his tone reassuring. "Rest now. We'll check on you again shortly." With that, Jordan strode toward the trauma bay, his movements purposeful and unhurried. Taylor watched him go, his expression a mix of frustration and something more complicated, something that looked a lot like doubt. As the double doors to the trauma bay swung shut behind Jordan, Taylor remained where he was, his arms crossed and his jaw tight. Around him, the staff moved cautiously, their steps lighter, as if trying not to provoke the storm that still lingered in the officer's stance. Inside the trauma bay, the scene was a whirlwind of activity. A car accident victim lay unconscious on the gurney, blood pooling on the floor as nurses and techs scrambled to stabilize him. Jordan's presence immediately commanded attention. "Vitals?" he asked sharply, pulling on fresh gloves. "BP's dropping fast, 80 over 50, a nurse replied. "Possible internal bleeding." Jordan moved with practiced efficiency, issuing rapid instructions to the team, despite the chaos. His voice remained calm and steady, a beacon of control in the storm. The patient's vitals slowly began to stabilize under his care, the room's collective anxiety easing with each decisive action. But as Jordan worked, he became acutely aware of a familiar presence just beyond the glass partition. Taylor was there, his silhouette rigid and unmoving. The officer's eyes were fixed on Jordan, his expression unreadable but intense. The sight sent a flicker of irritation through Jordan's carefully maintained composure. Why was Taylor still here? Once the patient was prepped for surgery, Jordan stepped out of the trauma bay, peeling off his gloves as he approached Taylor. "Officer Taylor," he said, his tone professional but edged with steel. "Is there something I can help you with?" Taylor smirked, leaning casually against the wall. "Just keeping an eye on things. Doctor, making sure everything's in order." Jordan raised an eyebrow, his voice unwavering. "Unless you've suddenly been appointed hospital administration, I think you're out of your jurisdiction." Taylor stepped closer, his smirk hardening into a sneer. "You think you're real clever, don't you? Talking down to me back there. You think just because you've got a fancy title and a white coat, you're better than me." Jordan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained composed. "I don't think I'm better than you, officer. I think I'm doing my job, something you might want to consider." The words landed like a slap, but Taylor didn't back down. His voice dropped, laced with menace. "What happens when you screw up? Huh? When one of these people you care so much about dies on your watch, you still going to act untouchable then?" The implication was sharp, cutting deeper than Taylor likely realized. Jordan's expression flickered, but only for a moment. He stepped closer, his voice low but deliberate. "You're right about one thing, Officer Taylor. I'm not perfect. No doctor is. But I'll never make the mistake of letting prejudice dictate my actions. Can you say the same?" For the first time, Taylor faltered. The confidence in his smirk wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Jordan straightened, his tone growing stronger. "I don't need to prove myself to you. My work speaks for itself. But you've spent the entire night trying to prove something to me. Maybe it's time you ask yourself why." Taylor opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Jordan held his gaze for a moment longer before stepping away. his composure intact. "If you'll excuse me," he said firmly. "I have patients to see." As Jordan walked away, the room seemed to exhale. The staff moved with renewed purpose, inspired by the quiet strength of the doctor, who refused to be shaken. And Taylor, for all his bravado, was left standing alone, his authority chipped and his confidence visibly shaken. The storm outside had softened to a steady drizzle by the time Dr. Jordan Carter returned to his small office in Memorial General Hospital. The weight of the evening hung heavy on his shoulders, though his outward composure remained unbroken. He sat at his desk, the faint glow of his monitor illuminating the patient charts he needed to review. Yet his thoughts drifted to Officer Mark Taylor, whose lingering presence in the ER had disrupted the night. Jordan had encountered men like Taylor many times before, individuals whose prejudices cloaked their insecurity, their need for dominance thinly veiled behind authority. Tonight's confrontation had been exhausting, but it wasn't unexpected. Jordan had learned long ago that success didn't shield him from bias. If anything, it magnified it. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Linda, the charge nurse, her expression a mix of concern and quiet admiration. "Dr. Carter," she said softly, stepping inside. "I think you should know, Officer Taylor hasn't left. He's in the waiting area, and he's brought his partner." Jordan exhaled, the tightness in his chest returning. He rose from his chair, his white coat as crisp as ever. "Let's go." When Jordan stepped into the ER, the atmosphere was charged. Taylor stood near the entrance, his posture rigid, his partner a tall, wiry man beside him. The partner's expression was unreadable, his hand casually resting on his belt. Taylor's smirk returned as he pointed at Jordan. "There he is," Taylor said loudly, his voice cutting through the room. Heads turned, and the hum of the ER quieted as staff and patients alike took notice. "This is the guy I told you about." Jordan approached with calm authority, his voice steady. "What's happening here, Officer Taylor?" Taylor's partner spoke first, his tone measured. "We receive a report that you were unprofessional. Officer Taylor claims you obstructed him from doing his job and disrespected him in front of witnesses." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and absurd. Jordan's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. Around him, the nurses exchanged whispers, their expressions a mix of shock and indignation. He glanced briefly at Caleb, the young man Taylor had brought in earlier, now sitting quietly in the corner. The boy's worried gaze met Jordan's for a fleeting moment. "Excuse me," Jordan said, his voice laced with steel. "That is an outright lie." Taylor's smirk widened, his triumph evident. "You think you're untouchable, don't you, Doc? People like you always think they can walk all over the rest of us." Jordan's expression didn't waver. "People like me," he repeated softly. "We're back to that again, are we?" The partner raised a hand, trying to diffuse the tension. "Enough. Let's keep this civil. We're here to file a report, not escalate things." Jordan straightened, his gaze unyielding. "If you want to file a report, Officer Taylor, let's make sure it's the right one." He turned to Linda, his tone calm but commanding. "Linda, please call hospital security and inform them we have officers interfering with hospital operations." The room fell silent. Taylor's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm following protocol," Jordan replied sharply. "This is my ER. You don't get to march in here, harass my staff, intimidate me, and lie about what happened. I won't tolerate it. Not from you. Not from anyone." The partners shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing the tide turning against them. "There's no need for that, Dr. Carter," he said, his tone forced into neutrality. "Let's not make this a bigger issue." Jordan's voice rose just enough to command attention. "I've been calm all night. I've been respectful, but this stops now." Linda nodded and picked up the phone, her expression resolute. A murmur of approval rippled through the staff. Taylor's bravado began to crack, his smirk replaced by a clenched jaw. He opened his mouth to retort, but Jordan cut him off. "You underestimated me, Officer Taylor," Jordan said, his tone unwavering. "You thought I'd get angry. that I'd lose my composure, that I'd give you the satisfaction of proving whatever bias you've carried through those doors. But I won't, because I'm better than that. I'm better than you." Taylor's face flushed deep red, but he didn't respond. At that moment, two hospital security guards entered the ER, their presence commanding. One of them looked at Jordan. "Is there a problem here, Dr. Carter?" Jordan gestured toward Taylor and his partner. "These officers are interfering with patient care and harassing hospital staff. I'm requesting they be escorted out unless they have legitimate reasons to remain." The partner sighed heavily, tugging at Taylor's sleeve. "Come on, Jake, let's go." "No," Taylor snapped, his voice laced with desperation. But his partner was firm. "Let it go, Jake, now." With a venomous glare at Jordan, Taylor finally turned and stomped toward the exit, his boots echoing loudly against the floor. The ER collectively exhaled as the officers disappeared through the doors. Linda approached Jordan, her face breaking into a rare smile. "You handled that perfectly, Doctor." Jordan nodded, his composure finally easing. "Thank you, Linda." Nearby, Caleb spoke up, his voice soft but sincere. "Hey, document." Jordan turned, his expression softening. "Yes, Caleb, thanks for standing up to him." Caleb said, "Not just for you, but for me too." Jordan's faint smile widened just enough to be genuine. "Anytime." As the hum of the ER returned to its normal rhythm, Jordan stood tall, his quiet strength radiating through the room. He knew men like Taylor weren't unique. The prejudice they carried wasn't a singular anomaly. It was a thread woven into the fabric of society. But tonight, Jordan had proven something to his staff, to Caleb, and even to himself. The storm outside had eased to a gentle drizzle as Jordan returned to his office. Sitting at his desk, he allowed the weight of the night to settle. Men like Taylor would return, he knew, but so would opportunities to rise above them, to demonstrate that dignity, grace, and perseverance would always win against hate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Jordan Carter would be ready. He always was. Thank you for watching this episode on the Empathy Stories channel. Dr. Jordan Carter's journey reminds us of the power of standing tall against injustice and the importance of choosing empathy over prejudice. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support our mission of spreading impactful, life-changing stories. Together, we can inspire a world built on compassion and understanding. See you next time.